Hollywood is in a dire situation right now, but that's not the fault of the countless writers, actors, producers, and directors who make questionable decisions that are unpopular with a fan base. No. The problem is you. Hello, I'm Marvin, and I'm the Movie Monster. Hollywood knows it's in deep doo-doo right now, with studio after studio suffering the backlash of their embrace of identity politics. Money! But with the money drying up, studios have to place the blame somewhere. You can't just guffaw the backlash these virtue-signaling projects receive and wave it away anymore. Because it used to be that people complained, but then these movies still made money. Now people are complaining and the entire franchises are tanking. It was a slow, steady deterioration, but now we're at the point where Marvel and Star Wars are both dead, DC can't get a foothold to save its life, and even AAA gaming studios are feeling the heat. Now, when this tide first started to turn, studios got crafty. They started hiding the identity politics in trailers and promotional material. You might think you're showing up for a film or TV about an established hero that you like, and then wham! It's time for a women's studies class. Son of a bitch! And for some reason, Hollywood executives thought that these bait-and-switch tactics were gonna work long-term. As though they were gonna trick you into the theater and then move you with the message. Fools! Idiots! Imbeciles! And so we got projects like Loki, Doctor Strange Mom, the Star Wars sequel trilogy, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and many more that pulled us in with promises of an adventure with an established popular hero, and once we were in the seat, once they got our money or our view, they switched gears and we sat through hours of our heroes going, LOL, I suck. This girl is so much better than I am. And then when you get mad at it, the media goons are just crouching in the wings, waiting to call you a misogynist, an incel, a sexist, a racist if said boss girl happens to be of color, and so on and so forth. They surrounded themselves with a shield of outrage so that your anger at having been sold a ticket or a subscription based on a lie, essentially being conned out of your money, was nothing more than a grown-up baby having a tantrum. And I get why fans are so defensive of these properties. You grew up with these stories. You grew up with these characters. So when they're sacrificed and torn down for the sake of a political statement, then that's a load of crap and you feel rightfully betrayed as a fan. And then the purple-haired holders of the world turn around and they tell you that this thing that you've loved for so many years isn't for you anymore. It's theirs now. And that might be one of the most infuriating things to hear. But of course, despite the fact that you're being told this isn't for you anymore, you're not welcomed, you're still required to see it. But if you decide to vote with your wallet silently, then you're still attacked by the shill media for being an incel who threw a fit and refused to see this film. Because you see, something like Ghostbusters 2016, despite not being for you, was required viewing and you just didn't know it. People like Brie Larson, Amanda Stenberg, Moses Ingram, and Rachel Zegler are entitled to fame and fortune, and the studio already owns your money. Didn't you get the memo? But even this isn't working anymore, because the vocal minority, as Hollywood loves to describe so-called toxic fans, isn't quite so minor anymore. If they were, then films like The Marvels and shows like The Acolyte would be doing huge numbers. It actually turns out you can't just deliver horrible quality content, shield it with virtue signaling, and expect success at the end of the day. Well, how about that? Shows like Buffy, Xena, Charmed, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Wednesday, and House of the Dragon actually earned respect and love from the fans. They earned the money they made. The writers, actors, producers, and directors earned the success they achieved from it. In other words, it's not the vocal minority you gotta worry about anymore, Hollywood. It's the silent majority who would rather do literally anything else than sit through the slop that you're slooping out. But you won't learn that lesson. You'll just continue to attack the fans like always. And that's what we're talking about today on Tooney Town TV. Oh, here we go. Toxic fandom. How Hollywood is battling fans who are just out for blood. From social media boot camps to superfan focus groups. So now, this article from Variety, I guess Hollywood's had a few too many failures recently, so we have to blame somebody for that. And good Lord, we could not possibly blame ourselves, so we have to blame the fans, and we have to do it through shill outlets like Variety and shill reporters like Adam B. Vary. On August 28th, Amanda Stenberg, oh boy, we're really starting this off on a high note, The lead of the Star Wars series, The Acolyte, posted an 8.5-minute video on her Instagram stories about Lucasfilm's abrupt decision to not pick up the show for a second season just a month after the season 1 finale streamed on Disney+. Now, I might remind you, nobody watched this show. Nobody. It fell out of the streaming originals top 10 very early on in its run. I don't think it ever made it to the top 10 streaming overall. Nobody watched it, and Disney didn't need a really long they didn't really need a long time to judge what that they weren't getting their return on investment. They were just ready to cancel this thing.
Olsen, help me up onto his casket so I can dance on it.
So she said, "It's not a huge shock for me," Stenberg said. Since the series was announced in 2020, she continued, "We started experiencing a rampage of, I would say, hyper-conservative bigotry and vitriol, prejudice, hatred, and hateful language toward us." Stenberg was unavailable to comment for this story. Oh, God. This story just reeks of just arrogance, like from the writer to the people they're quoting. So in other words, The Acolyte was the latest high-profile target of toxic fandom, the catch-all term for when fan criticism curdles from good faith dissatisfaction to a relentlessly negative, often bigoted online campaign against either the project or its stars or creative leaders. Look, the show was bad. People didn't like it, so they didn't watch it. And they went online and they talked about not liking it. That is the nature of the beast, okay? If anybody got racist about it, then that person's an idiot and a jerk and should not be listened to. But the discourse I saw about this show was that it was just completely agenda-driven, the writing was completely derivative, and all of that was true. The acting was bad, the sets were bad, the costumes were bad, everything about this show was bad. It has nothing to do with toxic fandom. They're just using toxic fandom as a catch-all term to cover up any and all valid criticism. In a franchise economy increasingly dependent upon established audience devotion to drive the bottom line, the threat of toxic fandoms poisoning that enthusiasm has become seemingly intractable headache for almost every studio, and it's only getting worse. Yes, the contagion that is toxic fandom. Yeah. You might like something, but then like somebody who doesn't like it sneezes on you, and then suddenly you're like, "Oh, I hate this too." It comes with the territory, but it's gotten incredibly loud in the last couple of years. Since a veteran marketing executive at a major studio, people are just out for blood. No, people are not out for blood. They're out for quality content. They're out for quality programming. Stop it. They think the purity of the first version will never be replaced. No, that's, again, not true. I think they're hoping that the purity of the first version will be replaced or that it'll be carried over. You look at something like Top Gun Maverick. Everybody loved that because you carried over respect from the original. And take a look at, you look at remakes and reboots. Look at the DuckTales remake.
Glom gold, glom gold, glom gold, glom gold.
That was made with such a love for the property, and it was widely accepted as being one of the greatest reboots of all time. Or they think you've done something to upset the canon of a beloved franchise. Oh, you mean like completely redefining what the Force is? Yeah, I think that's completely upsetting the canon of the beloved franchise, and they're going to take you down for doing so. Nobody's trying to take you down. They're trying to hold you accountable to your failures, and so that you can actually, in the future, actually produce something of a high quality, or that the studio will can you so that they can find somebody who will. Sometimes toxic fandoms behave reactively. A House of the Dragon episode featuring 2 female characters kissing and an episode of The Last of Us focusing on a gay couple were both review bombed.
This is a lie.
A practice of mobbing sites like Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb with negative user reviews, which gained mainstream attention following the premiere of 2017's Star Wars The Last Jedi. And an entire YouTube ecosystem is devoted to declaring projects like The Marvels and The Boys woke garbage, among other pungent sobriquets. Okay, so let's look at this idea of review bombing. It could just be that the episode was bad and people didn't like it. How about that? How about the fact that maybe a lot of people just thought this was crap? The Last of Us especially. That episode with Bill. I mean, look, I didn't hate that episode. I thought it was fine. I would have preferred to have seen Bill the way he was portrayed in the actual game. He actually got to go on an adventure with Joel and Ellie instead of taking this random detour. I mean, it was a fascinating episode. I thought Nick Offerman did a great job with it. It's just, I understand why people didn't like it. They're here for a Last of Us show. That wasn't The Last of Us. The House of the Dragon episode, I know nothing about that one. Everything I've seen about House of the Dragon has been pretty well received, so I don't know what you're talking about there. Now, just as frequently as the backlash begins before the project has seen the light of day, a Reddit mega thread dedicated to outrage over Bridgerton, casting a black woman as the love interest for Francesca. Social media epithets directed at actors of color cast as elves and dwarves in Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power. Death threats aimed at Leslie Jones during the press tour of 2016 Ghostbusters. Okay, again, we'll take this one at a time. I know nothing about Bridgerton. I would assume that it's probably they're probably upset because you're breaking the established lore of the time. From what I understand of that show. But now, like Lord of the Rings, nobody had a problem that you cast, black people as elves and dwarves.
I don't care.
It was the fact that that female dwarf kept opening her stupid mouth and talking about herself like she was Rosa Parks. Like, if you guys just cast these, if you just cast quality actors of color in these roles, nobody would care because they do a good job and everyone would think it was fine. The problem is they go out there and they're like, oh, what an honor it is to be the first ever black insert thing here. How about you just be the insert thing here? Why does everything have to be a milestone? We're tired of the milestones. Yeah, as Kevin Apollo likes to point out, we achieved equality in like the 80s and 90s when you had friends who were black, friends who were white, friends who were gay, friends who were straight, and no one cared. Nobody cared. All that mattered was that you were a good person. And then all of a sudden, around 2008, 2010, suddenly we were siloing everyone by race and orientation again. And as for Leslie Jones during the press tour of Ghostbusters, I don't remember what she was saying, but nothing that she could have said would call for death threats. If there were death threats, that's wrong, and I condemn it. Perhaps the greatest irony of this phenomenon is the disproportionate impact these toxic fandoms have relative to their actual number. What? The vast majority of any fandom are casual fans, says John Van Kitters, a VP of Star Trek brand development, who's been with the storied franchise since the 90s. The number of people who live and die on their franchise is very, very few, and those who come after things that they espouse to love with venom are a really, really tiny subset of that already smaller subset of the fandom. It's just much easier to see it now. I don't know that it's really that much broader than when things were in 1995. It's just that the bullhorn wasn't there. Okay, so here's the thing. If the toxic fandom, so to speak, were as small of an amount of people as you like to say, then why are all your projects failing? Why did no one watch Star Trek Discovery? Why did nobody watch The Acolyte? Why did nobody go to see The Eternals? Why did nobody go to see The Marvels? Why did nobody go to see Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny? For some, combating that bullhorn amounts to acting as though they can't hear it, particularly when it's a negative, toxic conversation. We don't even engage, says TV marketing executive. Like with toxic people, you try not to give it too much oxygen. One principal concern is that reacting to these kinds of attacks risks alienating the fans who are unhappy with creative choices about a franchise, but haven't tipped over into abusive behavior. You've already alienated those people. So a studio may attempt to amplify friendlier voices instead. We'll reply to comments that are positive and elevate those. Okay, so here's the thing. You're not alienating fans who are unhappy with creative choices about a franchise but haven't tipped into abusive behavior. You're lumping all of the fans who are unhappy with your creative choices into people who have tipped over into abusive behavior and are sending threats and racist things. You are lumping everyone who's dissatisfied with your show into that. That's what you've done, and you know that you did it. And you're sitting here and you're telling this stupid shill website that could not go out of business fast enough that this is what's happening, when in actuality it's the exact opposite. This is your doing, Hollywood executives. You are knowingly doing this, and now you're trying to clutch at your stupid pearls and gasp and hold on to your heart and be like, oh my stars and garters, they're attacking us. Still, toxic fandoms have grown so pernicious that they become fact of life for many, and so powerful that while talent executives and publicists will privately bemoan the issue, fear of inadvertently triggering another backlash kept several studios from speaking for this story, even on background. As one rep put it, it's just a lose-lose.
I don't care.
That doesn't sound like something that has to do with a vocal minority, a small vocal minority. Those who did talk to Variety agree that the best defense is to avoid provoking fandoms in the first place. Whoa, what a wild concept. In addition to standard focus group testing, studios will assemble a specialized cluster of superfans to assess possible marketing materials for a major franchise. Yeah, it'll be just like the superfans that they got together for the Rings of Power, with that girl going, "I'm gonna love my girl Galadriel," and then admitted she didn't even watch the show. They're very vocal, says the studio exec. They will just tell us if you do this, fans are going to retaliate. These groups have even led studios to alter projects. If it's early enough and the movie isn't finished yet, we can make those kinds of changes. Several studio insiders say they often put their talent through a social media boot camp in some cases. When a character is intentionally challenging a franchise status quo, studios will, with the actor's permission, take over their social media accounts entirely.
I am assuming direct control.
When things get really bad, especially involving threats of violence, security firms will scrub talent information from the internet to protect them from doxing. Okay, so here's the thing. You put these talents up knowing that you're trying to provoke that reaction. Because the second somebody says something that can be perceived as stupid and racist and threatening, now you've got your shield. Moses Ingram in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show was thrown to the wolves because they wanted people to harass her so that they can say, oh, all the people that hate this show are just racist.
Shields up.
In some particularly egregious cases, a direct response has been necessary. In 2022, after Obi-Wan Kenobi, actor Moses Ingram denounced hundreds of racist messages sent to her about the role. There's nothing anyone could do about this. There's nothing anybody can do to stop this hate, she said. Lucasfilm posted a statement to its Star Wars social media accounts that read in part, there are more than 20 million sentient species in the Star Wars galaxy. Don't choose to be racist. Star Wars accounts also share video of Obi-Wan star Ewan McGregor saying the abuse made him sick to my stomach, and that if you're sending her bullying messages, you're no Star Wars fan in my mind. Okay, again, you did this on purpose. You were counting on a fan swell of support. You wanted them to all rise up and be like, let's rally around this show as a social statement. It didn't happen, by the way.
Alson, help me up onto his casket so I can dance on it!
And later that year, the cast of The Rings of Power did the same thing. They condemned relentless racism, threats, harassment, and abuse. So Amazon MGM Studios TV chief Vernon Sanders said of The Rings of Power, the executive said the show hadn't experienced the same racist hostility in advance of season 2 that had greeted its 2022 debut. That's because, well, first of all, you weren't getting racist hostility. Secondly, fans weren't being hostile towards season 2 because nobody cared about it. Nobody cared. People wrote you off after season 1 because it was so bad. But not everyone in Hollywood is like this. Just listen to what Henry Cavill had to say when some idiot media shill tried to get him to dunk on the quote-unquote toxic fans.
I'm curious if that's comparable to this sort of world, this culture of toxic fandom, where like if you make a movie, especially if you make a superhero movie, like you have great intentions, but there are always going to be a small yet vocal group of people there can kind of just be toxic.
I understand what you're saying, but when it comes to fans, it is a fan's right to have whatever opinion they want to have. And people are going to be upset because, especially when you're talking about books or games, I don't necessarily consider that toxic. I just consider that passionate.
So anyway, guys, there you have it. Hollywood continues to attack you. They continue to attack me. They continue to attack all fans because, God forbid, anyone thinks it's their fault. What do you guys make of this? Sound off in the comments and let me know. Man, Hollywood would be so successful right now if it wasn't for those cursed toxic fans. I mean, imagine how well the Marvels would have done if all those radioactive man babies had done their sacred duty and gone to see a movie that they didn't want to see. Except men did go to see the Marvels. The largest demographic making up the film's infinitesimal audience was actually men. That means women didn't go see it. I guess they didn't get the memo that this movie was meant for their empowerment, and by not seeing it, they were supporting the patriarchy. And there you have the main issue plaguing these properties. The existing demographic is still holding on, but the studios hate them and want to replace them. However, the problem here is that the new, shinier, and more diverse audience they're courting either doesn't care, doesn't show up, or doesn't exist in enough volume to make the property financially viable.
There are dozens of us. Dozens!
So that means they want the demo that they discarded to show up for a movie that hates them, and when they don't, they're just istophobic. But the real issue here is the death of valid criticism. It's the death of the honest review. The entertainment media is now firmly in the pocket of big studios, and they try to peddle the Hollywood narrative. And you know what? Maybe they always were. Maybe the media has always been the shill media, and most of us just haven't seen it until now. But that's the beauty of the modern age, one of the very few beauties in this modern world. The people have a voice now, a voice that we didn't have in the 80s and 90s and even the early 2000s. Platforms like YouTube have taken everyday Joes, Janes, and monsters and uplifted them to give them an outlet to communicate our opinions that come from a place outside the Hollywood machine.
Hey, we can't all make declarations of hatred at the same time!
And that's a threat to them, folks. Your voice is a threat to them. That's why they do this. That's why they shield everything they do in thick layers of DEI, so that when you level valid criticisms at the quality of their subpar work, they can lump you in a category of people that should always be ignored. Don't let them do that. Don't stop making your voice heard, because your voice is more powerful than you realize. That's why they're afraid of it. They want to go back to the day when Hollywood communicated its pasteurized messages through the filter of friendly media outlets that shone the light they wanted on these projects.
Don't ask questions. Just consume product and then get excited for next product.
All while, and this is the important part, they're free to continue being debaucherous, abusive horror peddlers behind the scenes, wallowing in their money and committing whatever atrocities they want on star-eyed young performers who are eventually assimilated into their system and commit their own atrocities on others. So review even when they call it review bombing. Talk even when they demand your silence. And challenge the narrative while they demand that you accept it. And most importantly, continue to vote with your wallet. Because at the end of the day, that's the only discourse that truly affects change. Thanks for joining us today, and a special thanks goes out to our channel members. You guys are the secret sauce in the Big Mac at Tooney Town, helping to keep the lights on, and for that, you get special exclusive content like our members-only live stream Friday afternoons at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and exclusive early access to content like this. So if you're not a Tooney Town TV channel member, join today. And I hope you'll join us every Thursday night for our weekly public live stream, Tooney Talk TV at 8 p.m. EST. It's our live stream pop culture podcast where you get to interact with me directly and make your voices heard as part of the Tooney Town community. If you liked what you saw here today, please like, share, and subscribe. Click the bell icon to get notified of new videos as they drop. From all of us here at the Tooney Town channels, I'm Marvin the Movie Monster. Now get out of here!